There was a time when I called Bitcoin the AOL of cryptocurrencies. I used to think that Bitcoin was only popular because it was the first one at the crypto party, and that it would eventually die out because it is a slow, archaic energy guzzler. I thought projects like Ethereum, Solana, and Cardano were the future because they are so much more than just currencies and promise to completely reshape the digital economy. They promise to democratize industries that have long been centralized and return power back to the people. But the truth is that oftentimes they did the exact opposite.
And the founder is spending hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to defend the token. Isn't it obvious that it's a software company with an equity?
Would you classify Ethereum as a shitcoin?
For sure. It's the mother asshole from which the shitcoins spring.
Because you have to show very little actual use case. You can just promise. This is like true of any emerging technology. So much vaporware happens at the beginning when it's all promise.
In the midst of scams, false promises, and epic rug pulls, I've realized that the crypto space has strayed far from its original libertarian ideals. I realized that it wasn't Bitcoin giving the crypto space a bad name, but instead, it was the exact opposite.
Bitcoin uses more electricity per transaction than any other method known to mankind. Just one uses more energy than 1 million Visa transactions.
For a long time, I actually bought this propaganda. To be clear, Bitcoin mining does use a ton of electricity, but this fact alone is misleading as it implies that Bitcoin mining significantly contributes to global CO2 emissions, which is not only not true, but it ignores the fact that Bitcoin mining could actually accelerate the usage of green energy.
Here's the problem. In California, there is so much renewable energy capacity that the grid tells the operators to shut down to the tune of about 1.4 terawatt hours last year alone. Had that energy been used by Bitcoin miners when consumers don't need it because they were told to shut it off, it would have produced almost $700 million of revenue that could have gone to the energy producers.
Bitcoin uses so much energy because of its proof-of-work consensus mechanism. When a transaction is done using Bitcoin, multiple miners need to authorize this transaction, a process that is usually invisibly handled by a centralized entity like Visa. Once miners authorize enough transactions, they are entered into a lottery where they will then compete with other miners for new Bitcoin put into circulation by being the first to guess a 64-digit hexadecimal number. As Bitcoin's price has risen, miners have continuously needed more computing power to generate numbers faster than their growing competition. At the moment, Bitcoin mining consumes as much energy as the country of Argentina, which sounds like a lot. However, the US energy grid loses 5% of its electricity generated each year due to grid congestion, which is enough electricity to power all of Central America 4 times. A portion of that wasted electricity comes from wind and solar because they intermittently provide energy to the grid, so in times of low demand, lots of energy is wasted or could even cause an electrical blowout. Mining rigs would be able to buy energy during times of surplus, kind of like what they're doing in West Texas.
We're at this point in life where there's a lot of criticism about energy usage. This isn't low energy.
We're also the ones that are using power in the middle of the night. When people have turned their power off, the generators remain more profitable, allow them to keep running so that when your home or your business or the hospital needs additional power, it's already there.
The majority of Bitcoin mining used to be done in China, but then the Chinese government started pushing them out, causing lots of miners to move across the border into Kazakhstan. Shortly after, the Kazakh government evicted the miners after the country experienced widespread power outages. So now the US has the highest amount of mining activity. It was mostly coal energy being used for mining in Kazakhstan, so one of the results of this exodus has been that Bitcoin mining is now done using mostly renewable energy, as the Bitcoin Mining Council now estimates that renewables make up 59% of the electricity used. In El Salvador, Bitcoin is being used to subsidize the creation of green energy, in this case from a volcano.
And the volcano will power the whole city and will also power the mining.
So maybe Bitcoin wouldn't be as taxing to the energy grid as we have been led to believe. But it still only processes 7 transactions per second, which is a deal breaker for the idea that it could be a universal currency. But if Bitcoin is so slow, then how are the people in El Salvador making transactions instantaneously? Enter the Lightning Network.
Imagine if every time you send an email, every email server in the world had to agree that this email was sent.
Yeah.
That'd be grossly inefficient for billions of emails. And so instead, channel-based says, okay, so we're going to open a channel with a base layer transaction. And then this channel is now funded. And then you can send individual payments over that. And the software keeps track of that. And at any time, you can settle that back down to the base chain. So for anyone who uses Lightning in practice, you have your wallet on your phone and you can send money and receive money instantly.
Bitcoin and Lightning work in a very similar way to the traditional payment system, where Lightning is analogous to Visa and Bitcoin is analogous to Fedwire. Whenever a payment is made with Visa, this payment has not actually been finalized, but instead it is added to a running tab that keeps track of what banks owe each other, meaning that Visa is just a communications network. These transactions are all then bunched together, and the final tab is settled on the base layer, which is Fedwire in the United States. Lightning works in a very similar way to Visa and bunches together many small transactions that will eventually be settled on the Bitcoin blockchain. Lightning processes transactions instantaneously like Visa, and Bitcoin processes a comparable amount of transactions per second to Fedwire. The system becomes a bit more complex with international payments, where Fedwire must use a messaging system called SWIFT to deal with other settlement systems. Bitcoin and Lightning eliminate all of these intermediaries.
It's free open source software. The ability to physically settle value across the world, which traditionally implies counterparty risk, capital, float, intermediaries. There's up to 7 intermediaries in SWIFT.
The problem with Lightning at the moment is that many people around the world cannot yet access it because it requires open channels. But this is a problem that is being fixed.
We launched in a lot of Western African countries in December, and now we're here in January, Philippines. We're going to keep going.
Cryptocurrencies promise 3 things: security, scalability, and decentralization. The thing is that they can't have all 3 of these, so they must pick 2. Bitcoin chose security and decentralization, which is why it is needed to outsource its scalability to the Lightning Network. Other cryptocurrencies try to advertise that they can offer all 3, but in reality, most of them have compromised on decentralization.
In this cryptocurrency space, trade-offs are very well defined technically. So the reason Bitcoin may appear slow, it may appear expensive, that's because it's decided to be decentralized, to be censorship resistant. Sure, there can be blockchains that are faster and cheaper, but let's take the decentralized and censorship resistant labels off those. Do you mind? Because they can't accomplish them all.
Bitcoin's proof-of-work consensus mechanism has been largely discontinued, as the only cryptos that use it are old projects like Litecoin, Dogecoin, and Monero. So most large crypto projects today don't have miners or the exorbitant energy consumption that Bitcoin has. The most common alternative is proof of stake, which allows for much faster transaction speeds, but at the expense of decentralization. Instead of requiring miners for tokens, proof of stake only requires its system operators, called nodes, to lock away a certain amount of tokens. In the case of Ethereum, nodes must stake a minimum of 32 Ethereum tokens, which is worth nearly $60,000 today. This means that most people who want to stake Ethereum must join staking pools, which are concentrated amongst 5 exchanges. This system reduces Ethereum's level of decentralization, and it favors the wealthy who can afford to stake this amount and will earn exponentially more in rewards.
So my favorite test to run with people is all this DeFi and stuff like that comes to be decentralized. I just asked the founders, if the government came and said you had to go to jail if you don't shut it off, could you shut it off?
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, you could? Okay, then it's not decentralized.
This idea of an off switch has been seen repeatedly in various large projects such as Solana, Uniswap, and Bancor, as these projects were all able to mobilize quickly to make emergency changes to their protocols. Another point of failure is that 70% of Ethereum's nodes are hosted by large cloud providers such as Amazon Web Services, giving them the power to pull the plug on the entire operation. Other large cryptocurrencies like XRP have been pre-mined and are heavily concentrated amongst the corresponding company that runs it, Ripple in this case.
Bitcoin is an ethical commodity. All of these other altcoins are unregistered securities. They're all just equity tokens issued by a company in order to get around going public, and they're committing securities fraud.
Ethereum included.
Of course, especially Ethereum.
The cryptocurrency boom has often been compared to the dot-com bubble, but at their best, many of the altcoins are just versions of existing companies that live on the blockchain. At their worst, altcoins are outright scams with absolutely no real-world utility. But the bigger question is, are NFTs, DeFi, and Web3 actually groundbreaking ideas? Let's go through them one by one.
The problem with DApps is, it's just the economics of it makes no sense in the sense that, currently, if you wanted to run an application, whatever the application is, you want to run it on AWS, you pay a specific amount of money. You want to run it on your own laptop, you pay a specific amount of money per kilobyte of data. If you wanted to run the same thing on a distributed ledger, where you're distributing the data over thousands of computers worldwide, it's infinitely more expensive. And that's why we haven't seen any of these DApps take off. And that's why I've said this many years ago. The only working application of blockchain technology is Bitcoin.
Many of these DApps were unveiled as ICOs, or initial coin offerings, and a study conducted in 2018 determined that over 80% were scams and less than 4% were promising or successful.
Dick, tell me, what is the shareholder to make of the fact that Jack McAllister, your CEO, has unloaded a considerable share of his stocks?
If you buy crypto at $1 and then you sell it at $10, someone bought it off you at $10.
Yeah, probably in that same Telegram.
Probably in the same Telegram group. So you're literally stealing money from the other people in your community, the other people who believe in the project. Yeah. You're stealing money from them. It's player versus player. They start these stupid communities so all of you sit there and don't dump so that the developer can dump. Yeah. You're all dummies.
After the ICOs in the 2017 boom, DeFi became the next big thing in the crypto space. And to be fair, it does have some utility. The first use case is automatic market making, which is usually a service provided by a large securities firm like Citadel to provide liquidity for exchanges, making trades quicker and easier. The concept of this is good, but oftentimes these platforms have fallen victim to mercenary capital, where investors constantly jump from pool to pool looking for the best returns.
We're going to this party in the hills. Some modeling agency, I don't know, whatever. Beautiful babies. Want to come with?
Yeah, why not? Well, it's just dead anyway.
Another function of DeFi is decentralized lending, which allows people to borrow money against existing crypto assets. Because this requires borrowers to deposit 2 to 3 times the amount that they are borrowing as collateral, it favors the rich, who are borrowing money to avoid paying taxes. On the other end of these decentralized banks are depositors who are earning insanely high returns on seemingly risk-free investments. This is until the house of cards completely collapsed.
All right, more trouble in crypto. US-based crypto lender Celsius is filing for bankruptcy.
This is halted, meaning basically no economic activity can go on here.
In 2021, a new trend emerged in crypto that became mainstream, and lots of celebrities started getting in on the action.
I'm so bullish on NFTs. Stupid bullish.
I love being part of this community and being a voice and sharing my platform and just getting the word out there, because I think it's just such an incredible thing to be a part of.
Yeah, I jumped in.
Trump digital trading cards. These cards feature some of the really incredible artwork pertaining to my life and my career. It's been very exciting.
CryptoKitties was one of the first well-known implementations of NFTs, which is fitting because they are basically like digital Beanie Babies. NFTs are just digital ownership logs of quote-unquote artwork, which is often just a low-resolution JPEG. And the largest NFT exchange, OpenSea, admitted that at least 80% of NFTs are scams. Kind of like baseball cards or Pokemon cards, NFTs derive their value from their scarcity. It's beyond me why people would spend so much money on this, but the same could also be said about some actual artwork.
What do you think? Come on.
Well, I'm not saying I'd hang it, but there's something very passionate.
Almost postmodern.
Cryptocurrency projects are frequently criticized for being a solution looking for a problem, but Bitcoin was originally conceived in response to the 2008 financial crisis, which was a very real problem. At the time, Bitcoin was a tool to combat the malfeasance of the big banks. But in the age of COVID, a new threat has emerged. This is the threat of financial authoritarianism.
Government officials declared a state of emergency. They suppressed free speech. Perhaps most alarmingly, they froze the bank accounts of hundreds of protesters and their supporters. When I witnessed this cataclysm, this devastating use of government repression, I realized for the first time how free money is as important to freedom as free expression.
In the winter of 2022, Canadian truckers staged a non-violent protest in Ottawa against the COVID vaccine mandates. As a response, their GoFundMe page was shut down and the Canadian government froze bank accounts of some of the participants. But it wasn't only the truckers themselves who had their accounts frozen.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Although the Canadian government was able to freeze these accounts, it would have been much easier if they had complete surveillance over the accounts of their citizens, like if they had a central bank digital currency. CBDCs would allow governments to swiftly withdraw money from their citizens' accounts for unwanted behavior, and PayPal actually showed an example of this as they started implementing fines for quote-unquote spreading misinformation. Lots of democracies are exploring the idea of CBDCs, like Australia, Brazil, India, and Japan, amongst many others.
Governor Ron DeSantis took aim at a new currency the Biden administration is exploring.
Are you interested in giving these economic central planners more power over our economy, more power over your daily life and your economic activity? So what the central bank digital currency is all about is surveilling Americans and controlling behavior of Americans.
If Bitcoin can be used to combat authoritarianism in the developed world, it certainly can in the developing world as well. But in the developing world, its utility goes far beyond combating authoritarianism.
Right now, Bitcoin is actually saving people's lives. People are fleeing war-torn Ukraine. They're actually leaving to go to Poland. Are they taking their gold bullion bars? Absolutely not. And even if they did get to the border, people are absolutely corrupt. If they get to the border, authorities could say, sorry, can I have one of those gold bullion bars and only let you in that case. So you don't really want to be snuggling up with your Bitcoin. Nobody wants to know that you own Bitcoin. That's the fundamental value. You can flee tyranny. And right now you can flee, lockdowns. You can flee vaccine mandates, whatever it is your government is throwing at you, you can flee that with the keys in your head.
Wars and hyperinflation are the main threats that face the developing world, and even some more developed countries. While Bitcoin is down over 62% from its all-time high, it's up over 25% from its previous all-time high in 2017. Compare this to the Turkish lira that has seen 240% inflation over the past 5 years, or the Argentine peso, which has seen over 1,000% inflation. 37% of the countries around the world have authoritarian governments, with another 55% with either hybrid regimes or flawed democracies. A common question is, couldn't governments or large entities just take over Bitcoin? Who is to say that Bitcoin is truly decentralized? Back in 2017, Bitcoin had what is now known as the block size wars, where a majority of miners, the main producers of mining equipment, several large Bitcoin exchanges, and several early Bitcoin developers all teamed up to try and change Bitcoin's protocol, and they lost.
And the fact that with most digital currencies you can have hard forks very frequently and they can change the supply all the time means that there's a small group of people who agree amongst themselves how to move forward. They market this thing as, well, Bitcoin can't upgrade, but we upgrade all the time. Well, yeah, you know what else upgrades all the time? Facebook, Apple, Amazon, anything that's centralized is very easy to upgrade.
Why couldn't Bitcoin just be copied and improved at the margins? Someone could try, but their new cryptocurrency wouldn't have the 1 million miners around the world securing the network, or all of the open channels that Lightning has worked for years to build. It would also have a much smaller market cap, making it easier for an entity to launch a 51% attack and hijack the blockchain. Lastly, Bitcoin is the only project that was created by an anonymous figure for the purpose of fighting back against government tyranny.
Why won't you die? Beneath this mask, there is more than flesh. Beneath this mask, there is an idea, Mr. Creedy. And ideas are bulletproof.
There are use cases with other cryptocurrencies, but they are narrow and unproven. But if these projects aren't actually decentralized, then they aren't really all that different from companies that exist today. If they are designed in a way that favors the rich, then they aren't democratizing anything. At the moment, there is only one cryptocurrency that creates a parallel economy for the common folk trying to protect themselves from a tyrannical government, or the people in countries with runaway inflation, and that cryptocurrency is Bitcoin.